Hello everyone and welcome back to Worst Animated Films, where I find all kinds of bad animated films and spotlight them for your amusement. I decided that my upload schedule doesn't always benefit me considering I work full time, so to benefit this dedicated series that I've created, I'm gonna spend some of these episodes covering more than one film at a time. This also gives me a chance to cover a request or two on top of something that I just happened to stumble across. On my agenda today we have two films to look over, though I'll just jump right into the first film since most of the people already know what it is. I'd like to thank both of my friends Ask Air and Shom's Commentaries, as they both happened to request this film when the Dougal video was first released. Whew, the Little Panda Fighter. Well, this is gonna be a lot easier to get through due to this film's already garbage reputation. It's one of those Video Bricendo films, and I've already seen plenty of these films like 10 years ago or so on various websites and streaming services. These guys actually used to distribute other people's films and media, including Sonic X of all things. But then one successful distribution just changed everything. Kingdom Under the Sea suddenly started to sell well thanks to the release of Finding Nemo, and so they opted to create their own animated films as a result. Wanting more of that sweet secondhand Disney revenue, it just made sense. Kingdom Under the Sea, despite not being made by Video Bricendo, sold so well because it was so similar to Finding Nemo in so many ways. The business model was just set from there. Chase the trends, mirror the concepts from the biggest people in the North American animation industry, and eventually all that brown-nosing will generate your brothel funds for the next year or so. It just makes sense. As I said, I've seen all of these films before, but The Little Panda Fighter was one that I didn't remember very well. I remember that it was a very lazy attempt to bank off of the infinitely better Kung Fu Panda, but I forgot all about it until the internet started ripping it to shreds. And this was my first time seeing it in almost a decade, long before it ever became popular to discuss online. And honestly, I was expecting a so bad it's good type film, but its reputation is deserved, unfortunately. This movie's a fucking nightmare. I didn't want to go in with such a negative attitude. I usually like to try to see the best in things, and I find these movies usually really funny, but yeah, this is actually probably worse than Dougal. On that note, most of the issues I had with Dougal were ever present in The Little Panda Fighter as well, minus Harvey Weinstein, obviously. The character models speak for themselves. Ugly looking, poorly created models with disgusting anatomy, which is ultimately the biggest sacrifice for these mockbusters. You really want to pump these guys out ASAP and cash them in, like a knocked up southern girl eyeballing child support. This polar bear is a great example of that, as he just has the worst anatomy I've seen on an animated character. When he's in a standard pose, he looks fine enough for someone who looks like this. But hunched over, his arms appear to be completely segmented from his torso like an action figure, and these pecs look like they've just been the result of a drunken man playing with a hydraulic press.
You thought
And the actual animation itself isn't really much better. It's like a weird blend between like a Five Nights at Freddy's character animation and creepy Christian animated films like Herbie or Gaither's Pond. They don't move right at all, and they're just very jittery and spastic in their actions. It just doesn't flow well with any of these models, and doesn't even properly match up with the lip syncing.
A real man would have the courage to show his face, even if he was a big loser.
My essence? Oh, he must be talking about my cologne. Are you nuts? Oh, why?
Lucky he's wearing a mask. That way no one will know who he is when he inevitably bites the dust.
On that, I actually just noticed something too when it comes to the voice recordings. During this little audition scene right here, there's this bear that starts a piece of dialogue, but then when the camera switches to a bear with the same exact model on the other side of this table, it continues the dialogue through him before switching back to the original character model before, who finishes the line of dialogue. So it's one voice speaking one complete line of dialogue, but it's being channeled through two different characters between three different shots.
But I see a lot of raw talent that, given some time, could be developed with proper training. And in addition to everything else I've just said, Pancata, you'll be the first panda ever accepted into the academy.
Some of these models also just look like they don't even belong in the same movie. The main panda dude and some of these models look similar in style, but the rest of them all look like they just wandered in from another animated film, like the one about Joshua, if anyone remembers that. And half of them all have an identical base for their models with just slight variations like hair or some accessory that they wear. Like, holy fuck, the way this movie looks is one thing, but normally, like I said, I find find movies with this level of animation to be more funny than irritating. Leo the Lion and What's Up are good examples of that. They look fucking awful, but the plots are bizarre and make no sense, so that's where the entertainment usually comes from. But in The Little Panda Fighter, it just doesn't reach those marks. The ugliness and the film quality just gives me a headache, but the story and dialogue are so boring that it's hard to give your full attention to it. It took me multiple attempts to go through this movie in one sitting, and I just couldn't do it. It's just so painfully boring. I don't know how anyone can just sit through this film. Like, I had to find other things to do while I was watching it, because it just barely kept my attention. And to be fair, there's not really much to pay attention to, because the story just is so nothing. Like, okay, there's this panda dude named Pancata who works at this boxing ring / restaurant, I think? He's anti-violence and has a passion for dancing, but nobody respects him at all because he's a pacifist loser.
How about this? The kid here doesn't like to fight. He thinks it's too violent.
So it's like Kung Fu Panda mixed with Happy Feet? And Pancata has a crush on this one server girl, except she's so much of a Stacy that she does nothing but put down Pancata and drool all over the fact that she just wants to breed with a boxer.
Oh man, that Teddy's really something, isn't he?
He's all right. I mean, if you like him tall, tough, and muscly all over.
And the movie plays it up like any female love interest who just doesn't think much of the main character, but, you know, eventually she sees the good in him. But she's such a terrible person that there's no way in hell that you'd want him to pursue her. Like, why would you want to settle for someone who treats you like this? And it's not as if that this is just some one-off character that I'm harping on about for no reason. She's pretty much Pancata's entire reason for why the rest of the plot happens. Okay, so there's also this weird thing with this owner of the nightclub. He wants to beat up this reigning champion, but isn't allowed to fight in the ring again because he'll lose ownership of the club because of some strange contract that he has.
I'd show that thunder chump a thing or two.
Don't even think it. You get back in the ring and you lose the club. Don't forget, it's in the contract you signed.
So he wants to be this masked wrestler or wait, what? They say that this is a boxing club, but no one's wearing any boxing gloves. It feels more like a wrestling match. Pancata washes an outfit for the owner to wear, but it ends up shrinking and making the polar bear look like he's a panda. So everyone watches the fight thinking that Pancata is the combatant, when in actuality he's just auditioning for a dance school. Everyone is giving their respects to Pancata, who thinks that they saw his audition without putting two and two together as to how a ton of people happen to watch him perform in an enclosed room with an audience of 5 to 6 judges. Then he learns about the misconception through the owner, and the two of them just need to keep this ruse going. And this is where the film really starts to irritate me. Pancata has outright said throughout the movie that violence is against his principles. But once he has a talk with this wise Miyagi dancing instructor who goes from saying,
Pancata, you need to tell the truth to the lady. The truth will set you free every time. Take it from me.
to eventually just saying,
If you discover that you like when your friends call you this big boxer fighter man, then you must become this big boxer fighter to honor them.
in the span of a couple seconds, Pancata's pacifism becomes, I want people to like me because I like feeling like a champion. Oh, and Mr. Polar Bear, if you don't let me fight, then I'm gonna out you as a liar and make you lose ownership.
Mr. Polaris, I am prepared to blow the whistle to everybody, including the papers.
Oh my god, this is so fucking frustrating. I'm just gonna wrap it up real quick. Pancata trains to be a better boxer, but he ends up losing the fight. Pancata's whole thing about being a champion goes out the door, but
No, why?
Polar Bear ends up betting money on the other fighter anyway, making him a boatload of money. He retires, Pancata becomes the owner, and turns the boxing portion of the establishment into a stage dancing performance place. Despite this movie being called The Little Panda Fighter, he loses the only fight he was in, and the rest is about him becoming a dancer and winning the heart of a lady who creates incels faster than I can make YouTube videos. Now, I didn't really talk about this movie in comparison to Kung Fu Panda, because I didn't really think I needed to, because Kung Fu Panda is a movie that, well, knew what it was doing. But the big issue I have is that the studio's whole goal with their blockbusters was to sell films off the success of something infinitely better. That's what these films are made for. Like, it doesn't matter if their story was different, just close enough to be a cheap Ditto clone. But I still feel for anyone who bought The Little Panda Fighter, either through being tricked or just knowing what it was all along. Because it's one of the worst animated films that you can buy out there. I think the only bright spot that gave me any sort of enjoyment was the voice acting. and it's not the best, but the voice actors themselves you'll recognize if you're either like a 90s kid or someone like me who grew up with 4Kids anime.
This masked moron hasn't got a thing going for him.
You say somebody swiped your microphone? Nothing sacred anymore.
To make a woman notice you, you must show her you value loyalty.
I'm already sorry that you and your friends have survived. My consolation is that it seems Sonic didn't.
I assure you, everything continues to be on the up and up, contract-wise.
Are you finished? Or are you going to continue to hide behind your bluster and battlements like a big coward?
Even with that, everything I said doesn't really change how dreadful it is. Every aspect of the little panda fighter is bad in some way, and that's enough to dethrone Dougal. The animation, the models, the characters, the story, it's just terrible. I'm sorry. I can't think of anything else to say. So I've decided to set up a little tier system for how I rate these movies, just to kind of give everyone some perspective on where some of them might be. They all speak for themselves with their titles, so I would probably put Dougal right here. Then I'd say The Little Panda Fighter goes down here. Even if I do find worse films, this right here stands as an example of what not to do when making an animated film. So it will sadly sit down here as one of the worst among the worst of the worst animated films of all time. And the final film I'm discussing in this episode is called Achmed Saves America. This is one that I've been meaning to watch since late last year after I accidentally stumbled across it with a friend of mine. I never heard of this film before and I was shocked to see it. It's an animated film co-written by the ventriloquist comedian Jeff Dunham, featuring arguably his most popular puppet, Achmed the Dead Terrorist.
Silence! I kill you!
Jeff Dunham is definitely one of the most famous American comedians in recent history due to his gimmick of being a ventriloquist. Not a whole lot of famous acts do what he does, so he obviously stands out. He has an entire cast of puppets that people love, but Achmed became the most popular out of his lineup, likely due to the political climate at the time. He was introduced in Jeff's 2007 special, being within a very touchy decade for the United States. 9/11, the War on Terror, the Iraq War, which was still happening at the time of the special. So obviously Achmed was created to satirize the terrorists in the War on Terror, which would definitely work with the crowds that Jeff Dunham attracted. He's a very patriotic type of comedian who wants to portray his love for America on top of any criticisms he has, contrary to more staunch critics like, say, George Carlin.
It is a true honor to be in this theater with you people in the capital of the greatest country in the world, the United States of America.
And I was definitely a fan of his when I was much younger, and there are a couple of jokes that get me every now and then, but I can't say I really care for his style anymore. Hell, even Achmed is probably my least favorite of the puppets. His catchphrases suck, and he just seems to live solely off of the tired gimmick and the catchphrases, like the Fonzie or Joey of Jeff's comedy scene, or even the American stand-up comedy scene in general. And I think that's why he works the best. He's got the better phrases, he's more recognizable, and he showed up at a time in America's history where he would be the best received, and he's being performed by a very America-loving comedian. It just works. Which I guess was the inspiration for an entire movie about the guy.
Death to America!
Now, this differs from something like The Little Panda Fighter or Dougal in that people actually cared when they made this movie. Jeff Dunham seems legitimately happy about writing this film, and that is something I respect a lot more than just creating a really quick, cheap film for the sake of a few $100s in sales, or just redistributing a film with no care as to the production.
I think when you walk away from this movie, hopefully you'll feel good about this country. I love this country. I love everything about it and everything it has to offer.
So, on that front, I applaud this film for what it is. Though unfortunately, after watching it for the first time, Achmed Saves America doesn't really have a lot going for it. The first thing I noticed about this movie was just how strange it looked. Now, the quality of the animation is actually pretty decent. It reminds me of something like Family Guy or any of those Fox animated shows, and I guess my hunch wasn't too far off since this was animated and produced by Bento Box Entertainment, the same people who did smash hits like... anything else? Did they do anything good? There we go. The animation is fine, like I said, but these character designs, I feel like I'm seeing the work of a really talented 13-year-old making his own ripoff of Family Guy cartoons on Newgrounds. It's weird too because Achmed is detailed and stylized to look just like his puppet, but this family just doesn't mesh well with that style at all. It's a conflict in the art style. I also just don't know what type of audience would like this film. I mean, if you really like Achmed the Dead Terrorist, then I guess it'll be your cup of tea, but I'm also not not confident in that either because I don't really find this movie all that funny.
Girl car! Wiener substitute! Oh, hell no!
It doesn't really feel like what I'd see in a Jeff Dunham routine. It plays out more like a Family Guy episode. You got a cutaway gag at the beginning of the movie.
Are you forgetting you blew up our training camp? The only thing left was the monkey bars.
Oh, please. We are so much better than them.
You got your visual references, your out-of-place celebrity name dropping.
Whew. It's only you. I thought you were Jessica Chastain.
References to events that are way out of date now, and even the same style of non-sequitorial joke conversations, but they're just not funny.
Tom Cruise starred in one of my favorite films, Jerry Maguire. I got misty when Renee Zellweger dumped him.
Thanks for the spoiler, jerk. I haven't watched it yet.
So then, who is this film made for, if not for them? Patriotic Americans?
I think when you walk away from this movie, hopefully you'll feel good about this country.
I doubt even they could sit through something so bland to even appreciate the message it's sending. Maybe I'm not one to speak for them. I'm not exactly patriotic by nature, nor do I really care about national pride. Though it's hard to get on board with very, very baseline political commentary that doesn't do a whole lot to satirize either political party. They have this obnoxious gun-toting redneck archetype.
America!
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 And then they have the annoying liberal douchebag.
Ow! That better be cage-free.
This feels even outdated for 2014. The archetype of a far-left douche was beginning to shift in the eyes of the right by this point, and I'll tell you, it wasn't a 40-year-old white dude with a bald spot and loves Tom Cruise. Like, it doesn't seem like it's saying anything new or saying anything that you couldn't find in a better-written show or a better-written movie. It's not even doing a whole lot with the patriotic crowd in general. Aren't there better movies that portray this message rather than just, hey, America's pretty cool, right? I guess there are a few fun bits in this, like there was this terrorist leader who swayed away from hating America because of some all-you-can-eat buffet chain, which I got a little bit of a kick out of, but there just wasn't a whole lot like this here. It's just a really unfunny movie, and it leaves zero impact on you as a viewer. And the plot, same deal, but it's a comedy. The plot isn't always super important. It just acts as a DeviantArt base for the jokes and the writing. So I'm not gonna be as much of a dick about it, but since I'm not a big fan of the humor or the writing, that doesn't leave a lot to enjoy in the story. The first half an hour feels like a first and second act, which isn't always a good thing. It shows us how Achmed died and went to America, a process that lasts maybe 2 or 3 minutes after a brief little introduction segment.
Son of a female dog. Well, it obviously can't get any worse than this.
He dies and is immediately on the nose of a plane into the States, lands in the town of Americaville, population 1 liberal douche, 2 rednecks, and a bunch of middle-class patriots. There's a weird mix-up in this family who thinks he's a French exchange student and he ends up living with them. Achmed wants to blow up their parade, but then he has a weird change of heart and becomes an America-loving patriot. I zip through that, but the first 30 minutes have like the fastest moving plot I've seen in a while. And then the rest of it is basically the same. Achmed gets discovered as a terrorist by his boss who comes into America. He gets outed, and then the movie goes through this lie-revealed trope real quickly. He escapes, he flees to Mexico with his boss, and then the family he stayed with is being arrested for harboring a terrorist. He goes back to save them, and then the movie's over. I mean, there's a bit more that happens, but most of it is just like a string of really unfunny jokes. There's that buffet thing. One of the kids is a ventriloquist, which gets them out of trouble.
I want to be a ventriloquist.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Seriously, who is going to pay to see anyone do that crap?
There's just nothing to this. It's really basic comedy.
Hey, when this is over, you guys want to walk into a bar?
The plot doesn't really do anything. It just breezes on by. The characters are just bland takes on political stereotypes. Achmed is not a fun character to focus on in the entire movie. He just spews terrorist jokes and does his catchphrases. I really don't care to see that.
Parents, I kill you!
It's not awful, let me be clear, but it just really doesn't do anything impressive. I picked this because I thought it would be at least fun to talk about, but it's just no substance. So I'm going to be putting this in the snooze fest category for that very reason. For the next episode, I'll be looking at one of the requests that I received, Donkey X, which was requested by Speed Force Spectre, and to keep the theme, I'll take a look at, let's say, Shrek the Third. Till then, I hope you all take care.